Good day. Really, at this point in my life, I'd have to say that the RPG genre is by far my favorite video game genre of all time. Oh sure, back during my formative years, I was a big fan of the cathartic fun of the FPS, but really, as I matured, I wanted a better story than just go forward and shoot. Back in the late 1980s, putting a really good story in an RPG was somewhat difficult, mainly due to storage requirements, and basically the PCs at the time weren't all that powerful. And once again, we have to remember that for each character that's actually on the screen, that takes up a lot of memory. Hell, even each letter of a story takes up a considerable amount of memory as well. And so the stories of many early RPGs were fairly basic. And it doesn't get much more basic than the game we're getting to review today, and that is Dragon Warrior, aka Dragon Quest. Dragon Warrior was a very early console RPG, if not the first console RPG, and it really was, at the very least, the very first console RPG to make it big in the West. Now, of course, back in its native Japan, Dragon Quest was, well, a media phenomenon to say the least, and it, of course, is still extraordinarily popular there. And it's still somewhat popular here, although it lost out to Final Fantasy. Now, the story for this game is very, very basic. You are a descendant of Lotto, aka Edric, and you must save the queen, or princess, or some woman, I guess, and save the land from the evil Draco Lord. And that's it. That's all. And really, for the late 1980s, that's pretty much all you really needed. This game was, however, fairly notable for the fact that it was a very easy to get into RPG. You didn't really have to have a manual that explained every single bloody key, and it didn't have a 3-week correspondence course to figure out how to get the magic to work. Instead, you had one button. However, I will say that the menu system for Dragon Quest, aka Dragon Warrior, is fairly, shall we say, clunky. How clunky, you may ask? Well, if you want to go downstairs, you of course have to select an option from the menu to go downstairs instead of, just walking over the stairs and going down them. This of course would be fixed in the much later Game Boy Color port. But if you think that's bad, according to my research at least, the original Famicom version of this game was even worse. To face different directions, you actually had to select an option from the menu. As stated earlier, this is the quintessential JRPG. You wander around in an overworld, get into random battles, and fight. Now, the graphics for the actual monster fights are fairly basic. And I say fairly basic because this is about as basic as you can bloody well get and not have a goddamn stick figure. Essentially, it's a static image of a monster that's fairly colorful and somewhat detailed. He stands there and you throw your numbers at him. It's basic combat, but it actually is fun, provided you actually play it in short bursts. Now, back in the late 1980s, if you were an NES fanatic, you'd probably be like, this is the greatest game of all time! It's amazing, look at the graphics, they don't move! But today, if you play it outside of short bursts, your brain will shut down after a while. Now, each monster you kill gives you a small number of XP, and a little bit of gold. Now, I have no idea what all this gold is going to do to the economy, but you know what? I don't really care. Now then, after you collect gold, and of course, XP, you go into harder and harder areas, rinse and repeat, and eventually you fight Dragon Lord and you're done. It's a basic concept, but it works. I'd say this game has actually held up fairly well throughout the years, mainly because it's still fun. And if you use your imagination, which is something you don't really have to do these days thanks to HD graphics, you can actually turn these fairly static battles into something a bit more epic, provided you use your brain to do so. Overall, for a very early outing of console RPG, this game is excellent. It's got a fairly decent soundtrack that is definitely catchy, but not nearly as memorable as, say, Phantasy Star or Final Fantasy. It has very nice graphics for the time, that while they have aged, they still have some sort of a retro charm to them, I have to say. All in all, I would definitely recommend picking up this game, if only for the curiosity's sake. And, well, it's not going to be all that expensive. Really, this game is one of the most common of the early JRPGs, mainly because it was actually given away for free via Nintendo Power. And so, this is General Lotz wishing you good Dragon Warrior 2! and good Dragon Warrior 3, or whatever makes you happy.